I want to get into something that's been bothering me about how this Cleveland Browns quarterback situation is being covered, because I think the surface-level conversation is missing the actual story by a significant margin. What's happening inside that facility between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders isn't primarily a statistics debate or a talent evaluation exercise at this point. It's an effort story, a presence story, and the gap that's been opening up between these two players in the places where coaching staffs make their real decisions. Not the press conference podium, but the film room at 7 in the morning, the practice field when the only people watching are the ones who matter. That gap has gotten wide enough that I don't think it can be closed by anything Gabriel does from this point forward, before the organizational decision becomes official. Let me walk you through why I believe that, because the full picture requires more than headlines. The numbers from Gabriel's rookie season are the starting point, and I want to handle them carefully, because I think both dismissing them too quickly and leaning on them too hard without context would be intellectually dishonest. A 59.5% completion rate is the kind of number that reads as passable when you encounter it in isolation. It's in a range that doesn't immediately trigger alarm, but completion rate doesn't exist in isolation. It exists on a spectrum relative to everyone else playing the same position under comparable conditions. And when you place Gabriel's number inside that spectrum among quarterbacks who saw genuine playing time last season, it sits near the bottom, not the middle, not the lower middle, near the bottom. That is a materially different conversation than below average, and I think the distinction matters. The yardage numbers are where the difficulty becomes harder to contextualize away. 937 passing yards across 10 games. That averages to fewer than 94 yards per game, and I've thought about how to frame that number fairly without either dramatizing it or understating it. Here's where I landed. 94 yards per game is not an offense functioning. It's an offense surviving. It's the football equivalent of a team that has essentially conceded the idea of moving the ball consistently and is instead managing down to down, hoping field position and turnover margin cover for the absence of sustained production. The offensive line situation in Cleveland last year was genuinely bad, and that context deserves acknowledgement. But context only explains so much of a number that stark. The touchdown-to-interception ratio, 7-2, is legitimately the strongest element of Gabriel's statistical case, and his supporters have been right to point to it. Ball security matters. Decision-making under pressure matters. A quarterback who protects the football in difficult circumstances is demonstrating something real. I don't want to wave that away. But here's the problem with leaning heavily on that ratio as a defense of his overall performance. It has to survive contact with the QBR figure, and it doesn't survive that contact intact. Gabriel's QBR for the season was 31.4. That metric is designed specifically to capture total quarterback impact in a way that raw counting stats obscure. It accounts for situation, leverage, and actual contribution to scoring across every play. A 31.4 is not the number of a quarterback who is managing games efficiently and making smart decisions that protect his team's position. It is the number of a quarterback whose overall influence on what his offense was capable of doing was among the weakest in the league. Those two data points, the clean TD/NT ratio and the brutal QBR, don't coexist comfortably, and the QBR is the harder number to dismiss. Pro Football Focus produced a 49.0 overall grade, ranking Gabriel 41st among 43 quarterbacks in their evaluation system. I want to be fair here because PFF methodology has real limitations, and I don't think any single grading system should be treated as definitive. But I also can't pretend the grade exists in isolation, when it is pointing in exactly the same direction as 3 other independent measures. When your completion rate, your yards per game, your QBR, and your PFF grade are all arriving at the same unhappy destination from completely different analytical starting points, the combined weight of that convergence is difficult to argue against on intellectual grounds. The specific detail that cuts deepest inside the PFF breakdown is the big-time throw count, 3, for the entire season, across 10 games. Those are the moments that separate quarterbacks who are managing from quarterbacks who are leading. The anticipation throw on a tight window, the back shoulder ball on a contested target, the decision to trust your arm and your read when the defense has taken away the easy option. 3 times in 10 games, Gabriel showed a coach something beyond functional. 10 times, he put the ball in danger. That arithmetic does not describe a player building organizational trust. The sack number, 19 in limited action, is the most complicated piece to evaluate fairly, and I want to be honest about that complexity. Sack rate is enormously sensitive to protection quality, and Cleveland's offensive line gave its quarterbacks real problems last year. Attributing all 19 to Gabriel's processing or pocket presence would be unfair, but the relationship between sack rate and quarterback decision-making isn't binary. It's a spectrum. The quarterbacks who survive behind poor protection are the ones whose internal clock is calibrated precisely enough to know when to release the ball before the pocket fully collapses, whose read progressions move fast enough to find the outlet before the rush gets home, whose feet reset instinctively rather than freezing when the original play structure breaks down. 19 sacks in the games Gabriel played suggest that calibration wasn't consistently there. The line deserves some of that number. The quarterback deserves some of it too. I want to be genuinely clear that none of this analysis is meant to diminish what Gabriel accomplished at the collegiate level, because that record is substantial by any honest measure. UCF, Oklahoma, Oregon. 3 programs at meaningfully different competitive levels, and he performed at each one. The aggregate numbers across his college career represent years of genuine development and real production against real competition. The people who saw that body of work and believed it would travel to the professional game were not being irrational or naive. College production at that level earns your professional opportunity. What it cannot do is guarantee that the specific skills the NFL tests most severely, the processing speed under pass rush timing that is faster than anything college defenses produce, the anticipation windows on intermediate routes that require releasing the ball before the receiver has separated, the footwork requirements when pocket structure degrades in ways that college rushers don't replicate, will translate automatically. They often don't. They require targeted, urgent development work when the exposure happens. And the difference between the players who come out the other side of that exposure as something real and the ones who don't is almost always about what they do in response to it when the pressure is on and nobody is watching. Which brings me to what's actually happening in Cleveland right now, because this is the part that the numbers can frame but not fully capture. While last season's evaluation was being processed and the organizational direction was being quietly determined, one quarterback in that building has been present every single day doing work that doesn't generate content. No highlight clips coming out of it, no media narratives being built around it. Just the consistent, repetitive, unglamorous accumulation of daily credibility, film preparation, physical work, the conversations with coaches that happen before the building fills up, and that leave impressions that are more lasting than any individual practice rep. Todd Monken has been watching, and Monken is not a coach who adjusts his evaluation based on what's comfortable, or what protects feelings, or what respects prior expectations. His framework is explicit, and he's made no attempt to soften it. What you earn in this building is determined entirely by what you demonstrate every day, not by what you showed in a previous season or what your college record suggested you were capable of. Nobody walks through those doors with a guaranteed anything. You earn your position continuously, or you watch it erode. The problem for Gabriel, and I recognize this is uncomfortable to say directly, but I think saying it indirectly would be less honest, is that the daily presence picture right now is not competitive. The distribution of first-team reps is not even, and Monken has been characteristically undiplomatic about the fact that it isn't going to be even just for the sake of optics. Professional football resources go to the players who demonstrate they've earned them. When one quarterback is visibly and consistently in that building putting in work, and another is not matching that standard of daily presence, the locker room processes that information before any coaching staff decision makes it formal. Players notice everything. Veterans notice everything. The informal respect hierarchy inside a professional building is established through exactly these kinds of daily accumulations. And once it forms around one player and not another, it shapes how the entire environment functions in ways that are very difficult to reverse. Now, I want to address what's happened to Shedeur Sanders in the public conversation, because I think the full picture of what he's been navigating demands honest examination alongside the football evaluation. The criticism that arrived before he took a professional snap was not the normal skepticism that surrounds a player entering a competition. It was coordinated, it was personal, and it was delivered with a confidence that had no foundation in actual proximity to this person. Arrogant, legacy-dependent, more committed to the brand than the football. These weren't football evaluations. They were character verdicts issued by people who had spent no meaningful time around him, packaged as analysis, and distributed at volume through platforms where volume substitutes for credibility. The accusations that his presence in the professional game owed more to his father's name than his own ability ignored the fact that Dillon Sanders' name is an additional burden for a football player, not a shield. Every failure is amplified, every success gets attributed elsewhere, and every day you walk into a building carrying that name, you are dealing with scrutiny that most players never experience at any level. Shedeur's response to all of it has been consistent and complete in its discipline. No press conference devoted to rebuttal, no social media engagement with specific critics, no energy directed toward any external audience that wasn't also directed toward the work in front of him. He walked into that building, started doing the things that quarterbacks who are serious about their craft do. and let the accumulation speak without any translation. That particular kind of discipline, the ability to absorb sustained external pressure without redirecting any internal energy toward managing it, is not a personality trait that coaching experience can install in a player who doesn't already possess it. It exists or it doesn't. And the fact that coaches and teammates inside that Cleveland building have been responding to what Shedeur is putting in with genuine enthusiasm rather than polite encouragement tells you it exists in this case. Here's what I've found genuinely revealing about how the media conversation around Shedeur has evolved, and I want to be specific about this because vague media criticism is too easy and too dismissible. There is a pattern that becomes recognizable once you've watched it run enough times. When a player begins building internal credibility that contradicts the external narrative that's been constructed around him, when the film and the work ethic and the respect inside the building are all moving in a direction that the public storyline didn't account for, the football arguments inside that narrative start quietly retreating. The completion percentage debates get softer, the pocket presence concerns get mentioned less specifically, and in their place, character arguments arrive. Suddenly, the conversation is about attitude, about intentions, about whether the confidence is actually arrogance and whether the brand awareness is actually a distraction. A completely routine workout moment becomes evidence of something, an expression of competitive belief, the same quality that every successful NFL quarterback has demonstrated throughout his career, gets repackaged as problematic ego. The tell, and I mean this as a genuine analytical observation rather than a rhetorical device, is this: if the film were doing the work of making the case against a player, you would not need character arguments alongside it. The tape has always been sufficient for discrediting quarterbacks whose performance didn't hold up to scrutiny. When the tape stops cooperating with the narrative and the character attacks begin arriving to fill the space, that transition is telling you something important about where the actual football evidence is pointing. The film on Shedeur Sanders has not been delivering the story that certain media investments required, and the conversation has migrated in response. Shedeur's discipline in refusing to engage with any of it on that terrain has made the operation increasingly difficult to sustain, because sustaining a character narrative requires the subject's participation to some degree, a reaction, a response, a moment of vulnerability that confirms the premise. He has provided none of those things. The content ecosystem around professional football operates on engagement metrics, and engagement is generated most efficiently by conflict and narrative tension. A player who arrives in a quarterback room with a famous name, a fifth-round draft position, a confidence level that doesn't fit his draft slot, and the willingness to disrupt the comfortable order of an established roster situation is a natural structural antagonist regardless of his actual character. The role gets assigned based on the needs of the story being told, not the nature of the person being discussed. Shedeur walked into Cleveland and became immediately the most compelling figure in that quarterback room from a narrative standpoint. What's genuinely interesting, and what I think the people who assigned him that antagonist role didn't fully anticipate, is that the more aggressively the external criticism has run, the more durable his internal position has become. Every piece of noise he absorbs without responding builds credibility with the people inside that building who are watching how he handles it. Every morning he shows up while that noise is running at full volume adds another data point to the coaching staff's evaluation of his competitive character. The criticism has been functioning as an accelerant for the very thing it was meant to undermine. That irony is not small. The bottom line of all of this, when everything that's secondary gets removed, is straightforward. One quarterback in Cleveland produced a statistical line last season that, viewed honestly from multiple independent angles, created genuine organizational concern rather than confidence. One quarterback has been building daily credibility inside that facility through presence and preparation that the coaching staff has responded to with real enthusiasm. One quarterback is approaching this competition with the urgency of someone who understands that nothing is guaranteed and everything has to be earned continuously. One quarterback appears to be operating with a different set of assumptions about how this resolves. That asymmetry in daily investment, in competitive hunger, in the willingness to do the work that never gets captured in any external record is the real story of this quarterback room right now. Everything else orbiting around it is secondary. Coaching staffs in the NFL make their decisions based on observation, and the observation happening inside that Cleveland building has been accumulating into a picture with a very clear direction for long enough that the organizational trajectory has been shaped by it whether or not the formal announcement has arrived yet. Shedeur Sanders is not being given anything that his daily work hasn't purchased. What he's receiving is the natural consequence of showing up with full competitive commitment in an environment where that commitment is observable and measurable and directly relevant to who gets trusted with the most important important position on the field. The critics will keep producing content. The noise will keep circulating. And inside that facility, one grinding day at a time, something real is being built that none of that noise can reach or alter. When the decisions get made official, the separation will not surprise anyone who has been paying honest attention.